Up next, we've got an exciting program, something that certainly is on modern and up with what we're doing now in law enforcement. So certainly have Captain Ben Worcester with the Stafford County Sheriff's Office. So Captain Worcester is Division Commander for the Stafford County Sheriff's Office in Virginia, of course. Stafford County Sheriff's Office is a full-service law enforcement agency protecting 277 square miles with a population of 145,000 people. Stafford County is located in Northern Virginia, approximately 45 miles south of Washington, D.C. Captain Worcester began his service to the country and community in 1998 as a United States Marine. Hoorah! He learned the fundamentals of leadership and tactical planning. The experience as a member of the Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team would later play a role in the successful deployments of unmanned aircraft systems on law enforcement and search and rescue missions. Captain Worcester progressed through the ranks within the Stafford County Sheriff's Office, and having spent time in patrol, criminal investigations, and administrative services. He has completed various leadership courses, including the FBI LEADA course for executives and the Weldon Cooper Center LEAD program. Currently, he's the captain and division commander of the Administrative Services Division of Stafford County Sheriff's Office, where one of his many responsibilities includes the research and acquisition of new technologies for deployment by his agency. He also founded and leads a successful 12-member unmanned aircraft systems team for the Sheriff's Office. And without further ado, Captain.
Thank you. So I'm here on behalf of Sheriff Decatur, and as stated, I try to do my best to take care of everything administrative services for him and his Chief Deputy, Don Lenhart, who is in attendance today. So let me grab. That's all right. It's an honor to speak here. I'm very enthusiastic about this topic. I enjoy talking about this program. It's been a pretty good ride the last year and a half, 2 years, starting with the research and developing the program for Stafford County. So let's start with why utilize UAS. The return on investment is impressive, certainly when you compare it to the agencies with helicopter budgets. They spend a lot of money keeping those things maintained and paying the pilots and the insurances and all that goes into it. The capabilities surpass manned aviation in many situations. And I had the opportunity to see a video from Texas DPS, wherein that recent church shooting that unfortunately they had this past year, where the suspect fled in a vehicle, and I believe this was the one where the citizen armed himself and gave chase, and the vehicle was in a field at some point in time. Well, I saw the video from the perspective of the helicopter, and what was determined was that they couldn't see if the shooter was still inside that vehicle, and but what you could see was a little unmanned aircraft buzzing around outside the windows of that vehicle that had a perfectly good view of what was going on in the interior of that vehicle. So it definitely has its uses, and in some cases surpasses manned aviation. Certainly can travel into harm's way to gain intel about what's going on. We recently put one inside a structure for a barricade when we were supporting Fauquier Sheriff's Office to gain information on what was going inside that building. Chances of finding people increases. Of course, it's another tool. It is not the end-all, be-all. It's not 100%, but it certainly increases your chances, and the bottom line is that it saves lives. So, in my opinion, these are the steps to take to get started with the program. And learning the capabilities of the technology, assessing the airspace, determining the budget. You know, many of these steps are just like the acquisition of any other technology. You determine the budget, and then you acquire the necessary permissions to use that technology, which is the next one, the COA, or Certificate of Authorization, from the FAA, and 107, which is the remote pilot license. There's advantages to either one of those, and right now I think the best advice is to have both authorities to fly, both for the agency and for the individual pilot. Construct policy and SOPs consistent with the statute, and have a senior person involved in the program to get it implemented. Reach out to the media and local stakeholders, air traffic control, military bases, prosecutors, etc. And here in Virginia, we have a law that is a little bit more restrictive than a lot of the other states. And so the prosecutor one is certainly very important to have those conversations, to know that they're going to stand in the courtroom and argue for the deployment in each case and make sure it's legally justified. So the program structure we have here in Stafford is established way back in 2016, 12 members as a collateral duty. So they have different disciplines. Some come from investigations, some from the courthouse, patrol, so on and so forth. Every member has their license and after attending a 40-hour course. And of course, we have our certificate of authorization with night flight, which is another permission granted by the FAA. What the FAA does is they grant waivers to allow a lot of things to happen as long as you show that it's safe. Their primary responsibility is safety in the national airspace. And so many of these waivers can be obtained so that you can do things that aren't initially granted to you, such as night flight. We have a dedicated vehicle. We started with a Suburban, and we're actually transitioning to a transit van with an extended wheelbase and a high roof and get some more real estate and interior room to conduct operations. We currently have 6 aircraft. They're listed there. And each one of those is a different tool for a different job. It's kind of like a breacher's tool bag on a SWAT team. They do different things, different zoom capability, different thermal capability, flight time, so on and so forth. So what is our operational tempo? It's about 2 per week. We have over 100 missions to date, and we learn a tremendous amount when we go out on these missions. It seems like we're learning something every single time. We have over 800 flights, and we've learned some of these bullet points following, which are, how many we really need to deploy. We learned early on that 3 is really ideal to have 1 aircraft in the air because you have, your remote pilot, you have your visual observer, and then we found it very important to staff a monitor that's larger than an iPad and put that in a separate location. And their only job is to analyze that imagery, analyze that data. Because we found that's how you catch bad guys, that's how you find people. Because many times the operator is worried about their flight data, they're looking at a smaller screen, and they may miss it. So it's very important, in my view, to have that additional screen, nothing more than an HDMI output from the controller of the unmanned aircraft. So the equipment needed, that goes into that as well, and how to work with the FAA. Deployment purpose. So these are some bullet points that I made, and these pretty much mirror the code, which is 19260.1. This code section outlines really 10 things, in my view, where we are legally allowed to deploy unmanned aircraft. And, of course, it covers some of the administrative stuff like the traffic flood, wildfire, and disaster assessment. The missing endangered persons is covered really in a couple of sections in the code. It specifically highlights blue alert, seen the alert, and amber alert. And then it talks about to alleviate immediate danger to any person. And that's really where the prosecuting office and the law enforcement agency need to talk and understand what is legally permissible, what will you stand in the courtroom and support us on, and we know that there's no case law yet. It's a code from 2015, and we know that there's no case law defining to alleviate immediate danger. We've interpreted it as a little bit more lenient than the historical immediate danger, the knife to the throat right now. And that's through many extensive conversations with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. And initially, it was a case-by-case basis. It was every single time, it was a unique set of circumstances. This is what we got. What do you think? What are your concerns? Can we deploy? And so it was kind of painstaking in the beginning to work out those issues. And of course, crash and crime scene reconstruction. We're going to talk a little more about crash reconstruction here in the next couple of slides. And Public outreach events. We like to use it for Dare Day, National Night Out, get out there with the community, show people what we're doing. None of it's a secret. Touch it, ask questions, so on and so forth. So in terms of the crash reconstruction, we had an amazing success with the legislature. I'm no legal expert, but I feel like I can speak intelligently on this one because I stood at the podium in front of the courts of justice and was able to speak on it. I was nervous and they beat me up a little bit, but not too bad. The crime scene reconstruction, in our Commonwealth Attorney's opinion, prior to this bill, would require consent from the drivers, both drivers, or a search warrant. Now, with the intent being to clear up the roadway faster, it would never be faster to get a search warrant, we know that. And in many instances, it would be impossible to get consent from both drivers because sometimes they're unconscious or worse. So this was signed by the governor and will become effective July 1, that code section. Now this one I won't read, I'll just touch some bullet points in yellow. This bill, House Bill 638 and Senate Bill 526 were identical, and it talked about a trespass by drone for a dwelling, and it talks about giving notice and having to stay within more than 50 feet away from the house if you're having the intent to annoy, harass, and it has similar language to some other statutes that we're familiar with. And it also talked about the respondent of a protective order not using the technology to go after victims, and it also lumped in there that political subdivisions may not regulate the use of drones, because what happened is there's a 15.2 code where the Commonwealth said, okay, the locales can not make regulations on drones because then we'll have a hodgepodge of laws throughout the Commonwealth instead of one governing statute, or without working things out with the FAA. So the governor didn't sign this, but he made some comments and it went back, and I think the gist of this is going to remain the same. It's just going to be, the language is cleaned up a little more and it's put within the codes that are similar, dealing with those topics. And then this one is SB 186, the governor did sign, and it's making clear that drones can be used by law enforcement for purposes other than law enforcement without a search warrant. This video is going to demonstrate the zoom capability. Go ahead. And what you see is a pixelized, grainy video, but what you don't know is how far away the camera is. So, if you're familiar with the north end of Stafford, this is from Travis Lane off of 610, and the dock that we were looking at on the Aquia Creek, which is off of the Potomac, was 5 miles away. That's a 30x optical zoom, $10,000 camera, mil spec on one of the listed aircraft that I showed earlier. So let's talk about the mapping. It's not only for reconstruction of crash scenes, but this is for a case the Commonwealth is putting together. And this picture in and of itself, of course, is not all that impressive until you see how much detail is in here. Don't have time to show it, but there's a lot of detail in this. Where this flight was conducted about 150 feet AGL, or above ground level. And you can zoom in pretty good and see the finer points, because it is 750 photos all stitched together. And what makes this so powerful is it's not Google Earth from a year and a half ago. It's an hour ago we made this map, and it's the lay of the land as it is 1 hour ago. So in this video, you'll see that we learned a bunch of things, okay? This is the takedown of a meth lab. This is a search warrant. And we learned some vital information prior to this. You see there on the right, the side of the house, a girl in a green sweater running towards the back. So, and she sees SWAT members coming down from the woods, and we're starting to form this perimeter. And because it is a meth lab and it's dangerous, we have the truck with officers with specialized equipment coming in so that they can breathe and maintain a safe environment. So they come in, and so people ask, how far away are you? Do they know that you're there? Can they hear it? Can they see it? The answer to those are, we're a quarter mile away. They cannot see it. They cannot hear it because of that quarter mile. We launched from a quarter mile away. We did what I refer to as a periscope mission, where the drone goes straight up, stays there, and we just use the power of the zoom camera to see what's going on the ground. So we were able to tell SWAT members, hey, listen, there's children playing, there's a girl running to the back of the house, there's a teenager pumping a BB gun in the backyard. These are great things to know before you get on scene, and there's the bad guy. So this one I'm going to set up a stage for you a little bit before we hit play. This is a suicidal female in a Walmart parking lot on 610. We receive a call in the early morning hours. It's still dark out for shots fired. And when the first deputy approached, they encountered a female with what's believed to be a revolver in her hand. We then get a call while we're dealing with this distraught woman from a truck driver. The truck driver is directly behind this car. And so what you're going to see is the truck driver's call to 911 has us, of course, prepared to develop a plan to extract him to safety because she's in there with the gun in her hand. And what you're going to see on this video is her reaction to that. Now, it's a little bit grainy, but that's not because the technology is poor. It's because it's very low light conditions. And so it's grainy until later in the day when we start doing some other things. Oh, go ahead, please. So here she is, and kind of try to focus. She definitely has the revolver in her hand, and she's slouched down in the seat. And like I said, what you'll see is her reaction. So there's the revolver. You saw it real quick, and now she's slouched down, and she's kind of punched out like we would do lying in wait. And so I'm on the radio at this point, and I'm telling the SWAT guys, hey, she's pointing the gun out the back of the car. And so they were able to use that information to their advantage, of course. And thankfully, this one ended peacefully. In the essence of time, I can't play the whole video, but you see there, she's getting worked up. She has that revolver in her hand. And like I say, it was ended peacefully. At one point, we used less lethal munitions on her because she exited the vehicle. We had concerns about her going to neighboring convenience stores. She intended on going to get some smokes, so we brought her some smokes with the robot instead, so she would stay there. And this is that view I wanted you to see, where she placed that car there. The truck driver did not know, and this is that same moment in time where she's pointing the gun out the back, and you see the rescue team on the passenger side of the 18-wheeler. So this one is a thermal video. Go ahead and play it, please. It's sped up a little bit 2 or 4 times. And you'll see that as soon as the gimbal was moved up a little bit, you could see the heat source. It's a technology called isotherm, where you set it to see different temperature ranges in this case, human body heat. And it kind of illuminates it yellow. And so when the conditions are right, it really makes it unfair. It's very easy to see where they are and where they're going. I must say, I don't feel bad for them, but it does make it unfair. So you have 2 officers traversing the hill there. And I say hill, and that's one of the lessons learned on this video. I'm like, what is taking them so long to get to the bad guy? Well, then I drove there after, and I saw that the hill was pretty much straight up. And I said, okay, that's what took them so long to get there. So this was that gentleman that hid under the brush there. And I show this only really to show some of the social media praise that we've gotten. We've been very fortunate to have positive responses from the community. And they say, you can run, but you can't hide. Great job, Captain Worcester and deputies. Go Stafford. If I count correctly, that's Stafford County Sheriff's Office 2, bad guys 0. Way to go, can't hide. The drone will get you. So that's great that we get that type of support. We get some bad ones too. I'm not trying to give a image of only positive. Of course, with social media, you get some people that take advantage of the situation that don't like the police to begin with. This tactical scenario is a really one that was a lot more complicated than any of our previous missions. And what you have here, Echo 1, that's the call sign. So Echo 1 is going to do its surveillance mission on the suspect residence. Again, about a quarter mile away. And we're going to see what vehicle the suspect gets into. Then we're going to watch him as he travels to the drug transaction location, which is the Walmart on Route 3. This transaction is going to take place while Echo 1 moves to the secondary position, which is further up top left screen, and communicate that to Echo 2, which is the second unmanned aircraft system team. And that team is going to pick them up, watch the drug transaction, and then hopefully we'll time it right so that we're both in the air for the area of the takedown, which would be on a bridge. And you'll see that in a moment. Go ahead. So here's the target location. It's jittery, again, not because of the technology, but because I sped it up so much so that it became jittery. So there's the primary target. This is a family that's dealing drugs, and then they leave in both of those vehicles. So both of those vehicles become part of what we're responsible for tracking and giving updated information as to who's in what vehicle to the tactical team. We learned on this mission many things as well, just like all others. And one is that standard communication piece where you're using common language, and much like any other operation where time is of the essence and everybody needs to know what you're talking about, you learn the communication. And I got that's mom hitting the teenager. I got frustrated with how much they were playing like musical chairs in the vehicles. I'm trying to provide good intelligence as to which family members are in which vehicle, and it got to be intense there. So that's the target SUV, if you can see it, where the primary suspect got in, and he's getting ready to back into that spot, middle screen, just to the right of center. And he gets out and goes in Walmart, and of course we have undercover narcotics officers in the parking lot at the time. There's the target. And so now what you're seeing is the view from Echo 1, which, if you remember from the map, Echo 1's pretty far away, more than a mile away. And so it flew about a half mile and zoomed about another half mile. So here you have the target leaving the parking lot. You have other family members in that SUV behind him, and you have an undercover narcotics for sergeant in the white Jetta directly behind them. You'll start to see marked cruisers come on the scene, and our plan was to make sure that they go up on that blue and gray parkway where we could block it off and the minimize any risk to citizens. And so we use an undercover expedition there in a van and do our tactical deployment. And so that other location where we had Echo 2, their responsibility was to follow any runners. So we had the zoom capability from afar to get the overall picture, and then we had one right there close to the takedown so that we could capture any runners if need be. This is just a still photo of public outreach where we like to do the DARE Days and the National Night Out, and this is an example of a National Night Out. Go ahead and play the video. Thank you.
You can call it a high-tech takedown. Deputies in Stafford County are using a drone to search for a suspected gunman. And it's becoming a growing asset for law enforcement. But as our Bureau reporter David Culver reports, it's also raising some privacy concerns.
You're looking at thermal images taken during Thursday's manhunt. Stafford County Sheriff's deputies combing the western part of the county for this man, Jeffrey Owens. A caller reported he opened fire on a car, then took off into the woods. So the sheriff's office launched into the sky and spotted their guy. Certainly you have more condensed areas within Stafford County, but then you have a lot of land that looks, well, like this, a lot of open rural space. In fact, this is where Thursday's manhunt ended. Just think of it, trying to send a bunch of ground units to search all of this. Instead, the county had eyes above.
It's absolutely a game changer.
Lieutenant Ben Worcester oversees special operations, which now includes 4 drones.
So these are the front steps to our courthouse. Something were occurring here, public safety related, we could deploy this type of technology and gain information about what is happening.
The unmanned aircraft system, as they call it, can give deputies a clear sight from a safe distance.
It's another great way for law enforcement to leverage technology to save lives and protect our community.
A case in point, late March, the drone flying as SWAT prepared to move in on a suspected meth maker's home. Notice what the drone spots: children playing out front.
The drone operators were able to relay that information down to our tactical operators in the wood line to let them know of the potential concerns of the children.
While incredibly helpful, Sheriff David Decatur acknowledges drones spark privacy concerns. He says his office is determined to play by FAA, state and county rules.
And we want to continue to make sure that we're very transparent and that we garner the approval and the support from our community, because the ultimate goal is to save lives.
In Stafford County, Virginia, David Culver, News 4.
So as I stated, we've been the recipient of some positive media attention. We've had probably a dozen releases, and it's been all very positive, and we're thankful for that. Some random lessons that I've learned, you can read them, but some of the ones I would say important: start with simple missions if you're going to launch a program. Have the operators gain confidence in themselves. Build the trust within the agency that it's a tool that's going to provide positive things. Train enough people for 2 to 3 to respond at any hour. As we stated earlier, transfer the imagery to a large screen and dedicate personnel to that job. Decide vehicle or a trailer. The reason why I say this is, yes, you can launch out of individual cruisers, but what we've noticed for sustained operations where we've pursued fugitives for 10 and a half hours is that it's very logistically taxing. It's good to have shore power, and there's a lot of electrical requirements for charging that battery bank to be able to maintain continuous operations. Training, of course, it's important with anything. I tell all agencies to look to 2 technologies when you're looking at the program initially: FLIR and Zoom. Yes, they cost more, but in my opinion, the program will plateau at an early stage if you don't look to acquire those 2 things. I refer to UAS as the special operation that supports all other special operations. It needs to train with and deploy with search and rescue, SWAT, dive, traffic, and K9. And send them to a wide range of calls because they will prove their worth. And in closing, do not expect the technology to be trouble-free. It's certainly not. Don't expect that it'll have 100% accuracy. I looked at a study from a foremost expert in search and rescue that did the data on finding people without thermal. Okay, so this is just an optical video camera study. And what it boiled down to was it really depended on what they were wearing, the colors of clothing. What we found is high-vis targets were found at like a 90% rate, whereas low-vis targets were in 20 or 30%, something like that, and medium vis somewhere in the middle of the pack. So the bottom line is it really depends on what they're wearing if they're no longer producing body heat. So if they have body heat, it's certainly a lot easier to find them, as you saw with the thermal video. Expect the team to get better with time, just like anything else. and expect them to get better at imagery analysis. In the beginning, people look at thermal video and they get really excited a lot of the time, and they're seeing other things, it's not people. And so you'll see them start to calm down and get better at reviewing that data as time goes on, and expect to improvise, adapt, and overcome on missions. And when legal justification exists that supports deployment, my advice is to not be afraid to deploy, to get it out there, deploy, deploy, deploy. And that's all I have. In closing, I'll say that there's other successful programs in Virginia. I know that I've worked alongside York County a couple times, which is right in the backyard here. Loudoun County has a program. And each of us has taken a little bit different approach to our programs, but we've certainly learned from each other. And the three of us are all involved in a national focus group funded by the DOJ, where we get to collaborate with agencies across the country, and we've learned from those folks as well. There's some good programs in California and Texas, and we've all learned from each other. So in closing, don't hesitate to reach out to us in Stafford. We're here to help collaborate and help you get a program going if that's what you choose to do. Thank you.